Test, test.
Testing, 1, 2. Okay. Okay. Shall I start? Yeah. Okay. Hi. Hello, everyone. My name's Aaron, and welcome to Goto 10. I work with the events here. Just want to tell you a little bit about the place for those who have not been here before, and warm welcome to everybody. We are Goto 10, run by Internetstiftelsen. And this is a co-working space and an event space for people to come together, to meet, to network and mingle. A bit about Internetstiftelsen. They run the domains for .se, .nu, and they use their proceeds to put into places like this to support digital technologies and digitalization. So that's a little bit. If you want to find out more, talk to me, and I can help you if you want to become a member. We're open till 8 till 4:30 every day. Very welcome. So I will pass you on to Anna, who's going to introduce Tech Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, and we are very happy to be here at Goto 10. My name is Anna Broders, and I work as a talent and community manager at Linköping Science Park. And part of my job is to gather people and make opportunities to share knowledge. And I think Tech Tuesday is like a perfect example of this. Tech Tuesday is a collaboration between Combitech, Sectra, Nira Dynamics, SICK, and Ericsson. And these 5 companies organize each one Tech Tuesday every semester. But then we also have some Tuesdays where we invite special guests. And this is one of these Tuesdays. So we're very happy to have Axis with us today, who will host this Tech Tuesday. And we will talk more about design systems. And it's you, Joachim Lindhardt, who will talk more about this. So I will leave the floor to you. There's some time, maybe in the end, for some questions. So save the questions until the end. We take them then. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm here today to talk about design systems. And my name is Joachim Lindhardt. I've been working as a designer for 17 years. I've been very lucky because I've been able to work with design from many different perspectives, both from creating designs, working with visual design, UX design, working with users, but also from management side and design ops. And right now I work as a UX designer at Axis, and I work with UX on a strategic level. So I'm not working within projects right now. And I'm working in R&D, which is our R&D department. But I'm just curious, I'm curious about who you are. So if you please raise your hand when I say a title or a role and see if it fits on you. So how many developers or engineers are here? Okay, quite a lot. Designers? Yeah. Management? Product leaders? Yeah. Anyone in operations like HR and support? IT? No? Anyone feel left out? Sales, marketing? Yeah? Nice. Okay, cool. So, short presentation about Axis. This is our bread and butter. We design and create cameras, and there's a lot of different cameras, like 360 cameras, night vision cameras, ones with radar in them. Explosion protected cameras, body-worn cameras, and so on. We also do other hardware, like access points to doors, light warning, like sound or visual alerts, stuff like that. And we have clients from all over the world. We work with law enforcement, we work with schools, we work with hospitals, public transportation, and so on. So if you're in Stockholm, you take the public transportation there. They have about 22,000 network cameras in Stockholm, or in their public transportation, and almost all of them are Axis cameras. But we work on a global, so we're really large in the US and so. And also Trafiken here, if you're riding the bus, you can look at the cameras, and they probably have the Axis logo on them. But we also do software. We do desktop apps, we do mobile apps, and we do cloud services and stuff like that. And in Linköping, we're roughly 90 people, and we do a lot of software in Linköping. We have about 3,000 people in Lund, And then there's a bunch of offices around the world, but small ones. So the main bulk of the people are in Lund. But we also have a hardware team in Linköping. So we have a mechanical lab and electronics lab as well. And so, as you can imagine, we have a lot of different teams and we have a lot of different technology. And at Axis, we value having autonomous teams. So each team has a lot of independence. And so the combination of independent teams and a lot of different technologies, a lot of different teams and stuff like that, creates a challenge when we want to implement a design system. It's a challenge we happily take, but it's still a challenge. So roughly what I'm going to talk about today is what, why, and how of design systems. And it's going to be a fairly kind of broad, high level. So we're not going to deep dive into details, unfortunately. But that's a completely different talk, I think. I've chosen to define a design system. There's probably a lot of different ways to define it, but I've defined it as a design system is a set of reusable building blocks that helps us create a consistent user experience. The most known ones are Google Material Design and maybe IBM Carbon and so those. And what it offers us is, besides kind of the obvious things of graphical components and stuff, is that it offers us a unified language that we can use within our organization when we talk about products. So when a product owner says that they need a grid view, or a developer says that we need some kind of warning notification, those terms mean something. So we know what that is. And also that kind of gives us the benefit of not having to reproduce the same elements over and over again. Fast, I'm just going to recognize that design systems is nothing new. So the idea of system as design has been with us since, this is the Parthenon, maybe wrongly pronounced, but sorry about that. But in Greece, and they have these standardized columns. And also Roman armies carried kind of standardized walls when they went into enemy territory, which they used to quickly assemble camps. And much later on, but still in the past, we have kind of the same concept of systemized design or standardized design. We have the international style, which is a kind of a design style based on grids. And if you use the design system, you might recognize grids as a way of structure design. But also the Bauhaus movement in the early 1900s, which kind of converged functionality and simplicity and kind of reducing everything to its simplest form. All of these things kind of we can see today in design systems. And the first time design system, not the term, but kind of the idea to be implemented in the software was in the late 60s at the, NATO Software Engineering Conference. So they talked about how to standardize software development and best practices. And then at that meeting, they kind of termed patterns as a way of kind of standardizing. So, and then the design system term popped up maybe 2014, 2016. It's a fairly new term, the word itself, but the idea is all old and it's evolved over time. I'm going to just mention one misconception about design systems is that it's only for designers. And that's just not true because it might start from a design perspective, or it might start from a product perspective, but it always ends up in the hands of the developers. There's no need to have fancy design if you can't implement them. So design systems are very much an engineering or a developer question, as well as a design question and a product question. And so what is a design system then? It's very easy to put too much into your design system. It's like, oh, but what about our tone of voice, let's put it in the design system. What about our brand identity? Put it in the design system. But you shouldn't, because that's going to bog you down. That's going to make you slow. You should, not that these things aren't important. They're really important, but they're not part of the design system. So the design system cares about your brand identity as it relates to the UI. Your design system cares about tone of voice as it relates to your to the UI. But it's not; those things aren't part of your design system. So what is it then? Design systems are, I would say, if you have these three things, you have a design system. You can have just one of them, and that's fine if that's all you need. But you don't really have a complete design system. But the things are: you need components, you need pattern libraries, and you need style guides. And components are the easiest to understand. I think that's the buttons, the input fields, and stuff like that. Your pattern library is a little bit less tangible because it's a common way of solving design problems, and that could be like a data grid that solves how to display the large quantities of data, and that's a thing that we can look at. But it can also be behavior patterns, and I'm going to come into that a little bit later. And then your style guide, which is your kind of the foundation, your colors and your fonts and your spacing and your grids and accessibility and everything. And all of these three things should be represented in design. They should be represented in code, and they should be represented or documented somehow. So how they relate to each other, if we have our style guide with our colors and stuff, and we have border radius and margins and texts and so on, and we have our components, we have a card component, we have a message bar, and we have a main button component. One pattern could be, if we have the need to have a display status, the system status, and we have a need to do it in multiple places in our UI, then the pattern of the status card solves that issue and solves it consistently for everywhere in our application or our applications or products. And you take different things and you put it together into that pattern. But what you should kind of think about when you create pattern is this reusable, and do we need it multiple times? Because if you just need once, we just have the system status at one place, then you don't need to define a pattern from it. It's just UI. Don't make it more complicated than it is. Another example, which is kind of the other side, not kind of the tangible thing that the card could be. Another design pattern is, so if we have a choice with a bunch of options, and we say that as long as it's 7 options or less, it's fine to display as radio buttons. But if it's more, we should display it as a drop-down. That's also a design pattern that solves a problem with displaying along huge lists of options. So why do we need design pattern, or why do we use them? Why are they desirable? And if you look at product design today, teams have a lot on their plate. There's a lot of things going on when we create software, and design system doesn't solve all of them. Far from it. It's not. I'm not trying to say that, but design systems can be a shortcut, and by standardizing certain things, we can take those away from the team. We can alleviate the team of not having to think about it. So a design system might solve our cross-platform capabilities. So the team doesn't have to think about that every time they do something. It can solve our inclusion and diversity maybe. So the team doesn't have to think about it actively all the time. But it might not solve the, software accessibility. It might not solve that. But I think that if we have shortcuts that we can take, why not do them so we can kind of focus on other stuff? And if I had to kind of boil it down, what you gain from a design system as the big things that you get, the most obvious one is consistency, of course. There are a lot of apps out there or software out there. So as users, we go from Instagram to YouTube to Word to Figma as a designer, or to VS Code as a developer, and so on, and you jump between all these different apps. And if we have a design system, we might be consistent within our own application, of course, but we might also be consistent with other applications. And that lessens the cognitive load on the user, so they don't have to learn and kind of figure out how to use your software. And of course, this depends on how your design system is structured. If it's if it's done in a way that it doesn't align with everything else, then of course you don't have consistency with everything else. But by using common design patterns in our library, we can achieve consistency with a lot of apps, or a lot of products and services. And the second thing is focus, which is a result of not having to solve the UI problems all over again and again and again and again. So instead of, back in the olden days, when you sat down with a developer and you moved the button 4 pixels to the left and 5 pixels to the right, and then up and down and so on and on. Instead of solving that all over and over again, we can focus on other things. Not saying the UI doesn't matter. It's super important that the UI is good and looks good and all that. But it's more important to focus on what is the real problem we're trying to solve, and put our energy into that. And then just the UI kind of solves itself. But it's not all riches and marble halls. So there are a couple of pitfalls. One of them is the plug and play mentality. So if you have a design system that you're working with, it's easy to get caught up in the kind of component first approach. So we have a problem to solve. Let's look at all the pieces we have and just put them together, and we have a solution. And that might not be a good way to approach it, because you can have new features or new functionality that diverge from the defined design system that you have. You can encounter complex problems that aren't really solved in the design system, so you shouldn't really just look at the kind of building blocks and solve it from there. What you need to do is instead explore without constraints and do it without thinking about the design system. So you do it with all stakeholders, developers, the designers, the POs, the users, if you have access to them, the architects, and so on and so on. All that are stakeholders in this. And you try to explore, how do we solve this user problem? You sketch on a whiteboard, on a piece of pen and paper and everything, stuff like that. That is really kind of a way to break your mind free from the components first approach, and then you try to match. Okay, so how, if we have this solution, this is what we want to achieve. Do we have stuff that we can do to kind of solve it in the design system, or do we need to develop something new, or do we need to change something, which is fine. Second pitfall is kind of everyone will get it, or people are mind readers. So it's fairly easy to create a warning notification. So you have a warning icon and you have some text and maybe an action button or something. It's fairly easy to create. But how do people know how to use it or when to use it? So if you don't explain your design intent, it will probably be used wrong, kind of I won't say wrong, but it won't be used in a way that is intended. So if we don't clearly communicate that, it's going to be wrongly used or misused in our product, and that itself could lead to inconsistencies. But more so, the bigger problem is that when we update the component itself, we update it with the intended design in mind, and then all of a sudden it might not make sense where it was used inappropriately. So all of a sudden that part just breaks down completely. So having a clear design intent is really important. And the last pitfall I'm going to mention is that when we're done, we move on. And this is something very common to a lot of companies, not just with design system, but products in a whole. That kind of not every company, a lot of companies struggle with it. And it's like we build something and then it's done and we move on. We have the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And it might have been true in the 90s and early 2000s when you developed software and you printed on a CD and you placed it in a physical store and someone bought it and then they used it, and that's the software. But today we requires constant updates, constant service to function. And when updates stop coming, we kind of call it, oh, it's the end of life. And it's the end of life. That's why the product dies, is what we say when we stop updating it, when we stop working with it, even though it might be a fine product. And so, of course, the kind of solution to that is to have a good maintenance strategy. And that requires you to have an organization that kind of understands that and supports that you work with it actively, that you have time for it, you have rituals in place to update it and make it work. As soon as you're done with it, it kind of deteriorates, starts to deteriorate. So how do you get started then if you don't have one? If you have one, we can talk a little bit about that later. But so how do you start? It's almost always an initial investment. You should consider how much time does it take for us to adopt the design system in our organization. And it's not just about downloading the code repo or whatever and do that. It's about how do we educate people, how do we change how teams work, and so on. And the idea is that if done correctly, you will be more efficient with the design system than without. And I realize this line here, that without the design system, goes up and down as well. So you have to kind of imagine we've normalized it. So in relation to that, the idea is that with a design system, you do become more efficient over time. And what you have to figure out is basically how long is this? How long does it take for us to come there, to get there? And I've seen algorithms or kind of return of investments and people who calculate on it. You can probably Google it. I'm not sure if they're really accurate or not, but I would say from experience, you do get more efficient. You do kind of, it's worth it in the end, unless you have a very, very small scope, a small product or a small thing. But it all depends on your organization and code base and products and design and your people, even how long this is. And then you have to figure out, okay, so do we want to adopt or create? Or do we want to be somewhere in the middle? Adopting a design system is low cost. You have less customization and low brand differentiation. And create is the opposite then. And you have to ask what makes sense for you and for your organization and for your product. Maybe there's no design system to adopt, so we have to create one because we have certain special needs, or vice versa. And things to consider to help you kind of figure that out are the purpose, the scope, the adaptation and customization, the governance, and the community. There's a bunch more things you can think about, but these are the kind of top 5 that I figured was interesting. And if you look at purpose, so what are the problems? Why do we want to use a design system in the first place? What are we trying to solve? So do we have a consistency problem within our products? Then the goal is to enhance the user experience. Do we have efficiency problems, meaning we're moving too slowly because we're reinventing the wheel over and over again? Then our goal is to improve team speed. Or do we have collaboration problems? Then maybe the common language is the goal of having a design system. And you have to figure out what are we trying to solve here. The scope. So besides the obvious kind of things about how many products do we need to support? Do we have a product suite? Do we have 50 products that need to align, or do we just have one? And the platform, web and desktop, or do we need to support VR and so on? But besides those, you need to kind of think about how comprehensive does it need to be. Are we only interested in UI components because we need to be prototyping fast to kind of show a vision to investors or something? They don't need to kind of think about the coding thing that I mentioned earlier. But that means that you really don't need a design system. You just need the UI toolkit, and that's fine. It depends on what you need. So adaptation and customization. So how fast do you want to how fast can you get there, and can you get there with the current organization? Do you need to change technology? the coding languages and the tools that you use and so on. Can you customize it to fit your requirements? Can it handle themes and styles, stuff like that? And does it expose APIs and all those things that developers really love, I guess? And then governance. So how do you maintain it over time? There's 3 main ways of doing it, I would say. It's either the centralized or the decentralized or the hybrid version. So the decentralized means that, the centralized means that there is a dedicated team working with the design system. They have designers, they have developers, they have testers, they have maybe a product owner and so on. It's handled like any product, basically. And they, each team in the organization kind of submits tickets or something to them, and they kind of prioritize and do stuff. The decentralized is that every team contributes to it, and so no one kind of owns it. You have more flexibility because everyone can contribute. You can get there faster, but it requires strong coordination to avoid fragmenting components and deviating from pattern norms. So you need to communicate a lot and kind of set up those rituals. And then you have hybrid governance, and that's when you have a central team that kind of takes care of the main components or the core stuff, and then each individual team has the opportunity, can kind of extend on that, can build upon that. And the last thing you have to kind of figure out is community. And so, are there resources? Is there support? Is there third-party plugins we can use, or do we need to use? Do we have partners that are affected by this change? Partners who could use our design system. So how do we involve them? Do we want to involve them? If we build our own design system, how do we create engagement to have other people kind of contribute to it or giving us feedback and so on? So how I know it's kind of theoretical maybe, but so I'm going to explain a little bit how we did it at Axis. And I'm going to go back a little bit. So back in 2018, 6 years ago, there was very little alignment between our products, and we have a lot of different products. And since we value team independence and we want to have team independence, each team kind of solves their own problems as they see fit within their own scope, which led to a quite inconsistent user experience. If you are a user that jumps between products, if you're just in one product, it doesn't really matter. And so what we saw was that a lot of teams solved the same problems over and over again. They solved the same problems that another team has solved. And usually those problems aren't the fun problems to solve. So it's like, why isn't it working in Internet Explorer? Or why isn't it aligned in iOS? Or what's the best way to navigate large data sets and stuff like that? And usually, maybe someone thinks that's super fun to solve, and I'm glad for you, but usually doing that isn't the most fun thing to do. So if we can just solve it once and reuse it, it's great. So from there, the idea of having kind of collaboration between the teams grew, and we knew that we needed a design system. That was one part of it. And we looked into different design systems at Axis. Back then, there was a couple of them, but they weren't super evolved. And we quickly realized that we had to build about 40% ourselves if we adopted one of the design systems out there. And since they were all under construction, that meant there was a real risk in that, because what if they change some fundamental technology or fundamental part of the design system that makes we have to rebuild the 40% again and maybe again. And then also we had very little knowledge in the company of how to work together, how to collaborate, how to work with design systems, what technologies we would like to use, and so on and so on. So we figured that let's just build our own design system and learn from that. So we built our own with Adobe XD and React, and there was a lot of kind of going through to different teams and talking about the design system and explaining what it was. And we didn't force it on anyone. We still want the teams to kind of engage or be part of it by their own free will. But a lot of teams did want to be a part of it, so it kind of grew from there. And when we used it and worked with it, each team had a representative in a group of designers that talked about the design aspects of it, and each team had a representative from a developer side that talked about the development aspect of it. And that's how we coordinated between different teams to get it to work. And if a team had a certain, since we started from scratch with nothing, so if a team needed a primary button or something, or a grid view, they were tasked with creating it. But they did it by collaborating with other teams and kind of seeing how do we build it so that everyone can use it, or at least have the options to kind of use it. And what we learned by doing that is that fairly soon, maybe a couple of years doing it, other design systems matured much faster than we could do it. And it's obvious, of course, hindsight, that Microsoft and Google has a lot of more developers than we do. They can do it much, much faster than we can. And that decision-making made us slow. And by that I mean that since we had nothing to start with, everything was possible, and we can do whatever we wanted. And a lot of people had ideas and opinions, and we need to sync and kind of get along and find what's the best way of doing it, and yada yada yada. So that made us very slow. We took a long time to develop stuff, which you could consider, it's just a button. What's the big deal? Just go and do it. But so we decided then to instead let's look into adopting a design system. I need to speed up. Looking at these 5 questions, we wanted to become more efficient with our time, besides the consistency aspect. We needed to work for both Windows and web apps, so that was the scope. We wanted a good UI toolkit, the components that you use to build the interface in a design software. But we also wanted to work with tech that we were used to. And then we wanted to continue employ the decentralized governance model, and we wanted a strong community. So from that, we kind of looked at not all of these. I'm not sure which we looked at because this was before my time, but we looked at a bunch of different design systems. And there are a lot of them out there. Most of them are for web. Some of them are just like Apple I think it's just for Apple products. And Polaris is just for Shopify when you create products in Shopify. But we picked Fluent UI, and the purpose was that, or kind of the reasoning was that it fit our purpose. We got a lot of more features and more documentation, components, and so on and so on. The scope worked. It worked for both Windows and web. We could adapt it fairly fast because we were used to working with React. Designers wanted to work with Figma instead of Adobe XD, and they had everything in Figma and so on. And there was a good, strong community around it. And by picking it, I'm just going to show you an example of kind of what we gained. Is that if we have the warning notification thing that I mentioned a couple of times, I'm using the same example over and over again, but how we could bridge the design and development was that if we have that in our design software, and when it was done, you can mark it as ready for dev, and that's the little icon up there. And the developers could go into Figma because they have access as well, and they can see what is ready for development, and they can inspect it and look at it. If it's something new, they can see the colors and fonts and margins and everything, and all the options. If it's, you can have different background colors and so on. And then, but if it's something that exists, it says here message bar, and then they know that I just need to create a message bar. It's the same in their coding environment. It's a small feature, but it really helps a lot. We had some frustration in the beginning where designers, we tend to design one thing and then we design it again and again, and we have final and final and final and so on. And when the developers went in and looked at it, they couldn't really figure out which is the latest and what is decided to do and so on. So that really helped. And our designers are part of the daily stand-ups and everything. So it's not like there's no verbal communication. There is, but it's just this kind of small thing helped us a lot. We're here on the adopt create scale, I would say. We've adapted Fluent UI, so we changed the colors, we changed, made of our own icons and stuff to try to have our own brand identity in it. But we said that we try to keep all the components, or the functionality, all the interactions as is, to not touch that, not go into that rabbit hole. But we have created some stuff ourselves where we needed, and there are components or interactions that aren't in Fluent UI. So those we created. And sometimes we created it and then they upped it and add it. So then we try to remove our own and add theirs instead. So we use the standard stuff. Okay. Summarize. This is the what. So what it is. This is the why. And I can't really say how you should do it or why you should do it, because it all depends on your organization, your products and everything. It's really, there's no kind of one way of doing this. So instead, kind of try to think about those things. And even if you have a design system and working with one, it's still worth kind of figuring out what's our purpose and what's our scope and so on and so on. If you want to learn more, there's a great website called NN Group. It's the Nielsen Norman Group. So we can take a picture of this if you want to. There's a good article about design systems that you can read. This one is a little bit more secretive, but it's a good web page where you can see design patterns. And they have both design patterns from a UI perspective, UI patterns, like a drag and drop pattern, for instance. But they also have persuasive patterns, which is the psychological aspects of it. So they have they describe the IKEA effect, for instance, which is people tend to be more positive to stuff that they've built themselves or created themselves. They put more value in that. So that's a cognitive or a persuasive pattern that we can use, hopefully not in a bad way, but in a good way, to encourage users to do something, for instance. And the last thing here is that to find design systems, I've tried to find a good list or a good kind of source for that, but I haven't. So Google or use your favorite AI chatbot, because you can. There's a lot of them out there. That's all from me. Thanks. Any questions? Or
Do we have any questions? I don't think it worked. Let me try. We have something called digital as well. I think we need to.
I was wondering, you said that you had the customers worldwide, and do you need to adapt the look and feel and the behavior to the different cultural or geographical positions?
Yeah, to some extent we do. So we do want a design system that supports right to left, for instance, for those who read it that way. And also consider iconography. I know that the thumbs up aren't always positive in all cultures, for instance, stuff like that. So we do think about it, but I wouldn't say that we've I don't think that we have it 100% nailed. But yeah.
Do we have any more questions? No.
Up there.
Yeah, when you work with many products using the same library, how do you make sure that even though one of the projects might not know how they want to be able to use a component, how do you include them in the designing process or the decision process, so you don't have to go back to that one too many times when the others came to the same point in the project?
Yeah, good question. We have a group of, or every designer from each team, basically, or representing each team, and each team represents a product. Basically, it's not one-to-one always, but basically, so they meet once every week and talk about their project or their product, and present. So I have this problem, or I have this solution to problem, and then others kind of contribute or say, we have the same problem and we solved it like this, and so on. So we have a fairly informal process for it, but it's that meeting basically that kind of solves it for us.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? Otherwise, Joachim promised me to stay a bit afterwards as well. So if you have a question, also feel free to come and ask Joachim right away. Thank you very much for this presentation. We start with a big applause for Joachim.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming. Next Tech Tuesday will be the 24th of September, and it will be SICK who's hosting. And I think the theme is industrial cybersecurity. I haven't got it 100% confirmed. I also know that it could be only on-site, so not digital. So be prepared to register when we open the registration at our event page. Thank you very much for today.